Bioware's Anthem continues to make headlines, not for anything good, of course, like several live service games that came before it. Anthem's remaining in the news because we all want to rubberneck the shit show. By far, Anthem's biggest ongoing problem among its audience, yes, Anthem still has an audience, concerns its loot drops. In short, there simply aren't enough of them. The game is incredibly stingy. It's an absolute grind to play. People report going over and over the same old missions trying to get masterwork and legendary items, but the game's so fucking miserly it's not dropping anything. And on the surface there seems to be no real reason for this. Electronic Arts isn't selling you better weapons, it's not selling you better gear, its microtransaction bollocks is focused mostly on the cosmetic. And yet Anthem's loot drops have been compared to those of Diablo 3. Not modern Diablo 3. Not good Diablo 3, launch Diablo 3. Diablo 3 at launch had an auction house where you could buy and sell the gear you needed. Real money could change hands at the auction house, which of course Activision and Blizzard took a percentage of. And rather than simply incentivize going to the auction house, Diablo 3 railroaded people into the auction house by drowning them in loot they didn't need and, more importantly, couldn't use. They were getting loot that would not work with the character they were playing with, and this was done on purpose to try and make them sell that loot at the auction house and buy the loot they weren't getting, which was the loot they needed. Paul Tassi at Forbes makes the comparison, saying that the legendary drop rate is ridiculously low, that legendary items can drop for other classes, so if once in a blue moon you get a really cool piece of gear, you might not be able to use it. The legendaries that currently exist are barely better versions of weapons you can already get commonly. The difficulty tiers don't make sense when tied to gear progression, and you need loot drops because you can't progress in the game without them. All of this combines to make a very unsatisfying game. And unsatisfying is certainly the word I'd use to describe the time I spent, or rather the time I wasted, playing Anthem. After just a few short hours in the game, I couldn't bear playing much more of it. I did, but under duress. It's just the same thing over and over again, and you're not even getting good rewards for doing the same thing over and over again. Hell, even if the legendary items dropped at a better rate, you're just getting assault rifles and other rifles, just really boring bug-in-basement weapons. At least Diablo 3, even at its worst, had interesting looking loot. Compounding all this is Anthem's latest updates making loot even worse, because of course. An earlier patch made it so that if you go through a Grandmaster Stronghold, you will get at least one Masterwork item. Basically, if you do the difficult, tedious thing, you'll get at least one good reward for it. The latest patch, for a time, fucked all that up. People were going through that tedious endgame slog and not getting the guaranteed masterwork they were expecting. Loot chests were meant to be more rewarding as well, but Grandmaster chests were giving out piss-worthless common and uncommon items when items at that level were supposed to have been removed from the item pool. A number of other bugs were introduced with the patch, of course, though Bioware has pushed a fix to deal with the masterworks not dropping, and another issue where players could pick up the loot of other players. It would appear that Bioware is trying to address the community's issues with loot in subtle ways, doing it via tweaks, but the community just wants the most straightforward, the most simple solution: more loot. Increase the drop rate. Anthem right now is extremely, obscenely, absurdly miserly with its loot. For one glorious weekend, a few weeks ago, Anthem fucked up and introduced a bug that raised the loot drop rates. This so-called loot shower was celebrated by the community. It didn't break the game in any way, it didn't make Anthem worse. On the contrary, people were reporting having more fun that weekend than they had with the entirety of Anthem up to that point. The game suddenly felt rewarding. The game was actually giving players cool shit in exchange for them playing the game, which in a looter-shooter, you'd think that would be important. As much loot to match the shoot. But despite that bug being the best fix Anthem's ever had, it wasn't on Bioware or EA's docket, so they fixed the fix. fix. Or at least it was a fix as far as this cat's concerned. Here's a post on the Anthem subreddit. New update is good, but summon the loot. Just let us get way more legendaries, it said. Stop making the game a fucking grind. They didn't say that last bit verbatim, that was just me. A thread about people quitting due to poor loot drop rates sits at over 400 comments because people are way more interested in talking about shit like that than they are in playing Anthem. Meanwhile, with over 1,000 comments, is a theory that Anthem uses advanced psychologically manipulative AI to funnel players towards Anthem's monetization. I woke up to loads of emails about that, but there doesn't seem to be much in the way of concrete evidence that Anthem's doing this, and a leaked paper that talks about this advanced AI and uses screen grabs from Anthem seems a bit too sketchy to really take all that seriously. Not that game publishers aren't always looking at ways to further manipulate players and to exploit and abuse algorithms. There is of course always that famous Activision patent that does similar stuff, but all the information floating around this theory and the theory itself is probably false until proven otherwise. But in any case, this goes back to a point I've made in the past, that these modern live service games are so dull, so boring, so bereft of anything interesting to do, that players are bored off their asses and would rather talk about conspiracy theories than play the damn game, and I don't blame them. The rapid spread and discussion about that theory also speaks to people's desire to know why Anthem is the way it is. Why is this non-pay-to-win game nonetheless being stingy about its loot? I've shared my theory before and I'll share it again. I think it's because these video games, because a lot of modern AAA video games, especially these live service ones, are not designed to be fun. They're designed to be engaging, and engagement can take many forms. For example, on YouTube's algorithms detect likes and dislikes and pick both of those up as engagement. It doesn't care whether the engagement's positive or negative. All that matters is that people are engaging with the content. And of course, since Anthem's content is fucking threadbare, pretty much all they have is a carrot on a stick in the form of loot. It preys upon the sunk cost fallacy. People who have put hours and hours and hours into Anthem likely don't want to give up, especially when there's a chance, however minute, that the next stronghold will be different. The next stronghold will have a masterwork for them, and it might even be good. Now, Electronic Arts knows that the sunk cost carrot and stick approach works, because that exact same approach is what made loot boxes so effective and so fucking dangerous. EA knows if it can get its hooks into at least some of the audience that picked Anthem up, they have their engagement, and the more people are engaged, the more people are hooked, the more time, the more chances EA has to sell them additional content. It's not as sophisticated as manipulative artificial intelligence, but it's nonetheless effective. Games like Anthem creep me out. They're not fun, and they're not supposed to be fun. They're tedious by design, which is certainly a risk. I mean, it turned me off, it stopped me playing it after a day, but they just need to sucker enough people into its repetitive, tedious gameplay loop to get them playing out of compulsion more than enjoyment. And I'm certainly not above it. The Division 2 is a rather dull, mostly just fine game. One that I didn't really have much fun with, if I'm being perfectly honest with you, and yet I still played it for a straight week, often having really long gameplay sessions with it. The major difference is the Division 2 actually really does shower you in loot. Not great loot, most of it's a waste of time, but you certainly do get a better rate of incrementally superior gear. It was at the opposite end of the spectrum to Anthem's loot, but it still worked the same way. I was bored, but I couldn't stop playing because rather than a carrot and stick, the Division 2 employed a breadcrumb approach. It was a constant feed of loot that was propelling me across a rather boring game. The point is that games don't need to be good, they just need to have one hook, one loop, one attraction that suckers you in and gets you addicted. A significant amount of Anthem's audience is bored shitless, but is still playing Anthem. And like everyone who tried it and gave up on it because it was so dull, they would much rather talk about the shit circus, the humiliation, the nonsense, the peripheral overall controversies that surround the game, because that is more interesting. That is more fun to talk about. But whether you subscribe to my personal theory or not about why Anthem is the way it is, just remember at all times, Anthem isn't the way it is by accident. Except when they introduce patches that break it, then it is. It's unsatisfying and unrewarding by design. There's a reason for it. Remember, Bioware patched out to the loot shower. They stopped the game being more rewarding because they didn't want it to be. They wanted Anthem to be this way, and I find that concerning.
The master works all, you can't go wrong.